Walk into the Dutch Room of Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum today, and you'll see something strange. Empty frames hang on the walls, gilded rectangles where masterpieces once lived. They've been there since 1994, 4 years after the theft. Not as a memorial, as placeholders. Because the museum, the FBI, and everyone who's touched this case believes those paintings are coming back. 35 years later, they're still waiting. On March 18th, 1990, two men walked out of that museum with 13 works of art. 81 minutes, start to finish. $500 million worth of cultural heritage, gone. Among the haul was the concert by Johannes Vermeer, one of only 34 paintings the Dutch master ever created, now considered the most valuable stolen object in the world. $250 million for a single canvas. They also took Rembrandt's only seascape, the storm on the Sea of Galilee, 5 Degas sketches, a Manet, and bizarrely, a $3,000 Chinese bronze cup and the eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag. This is the largest art heist in American history. The FBI knows who did it. Both thieves are dead, but the paintings still gone. And the story of how this happened, who pulled it off, and where those masterpieces might be hiding involves Boston mobsters, mysterious midnight meetings, 4 murders in 18 months, a security guard who may or may not have been in on it, and a trail that goes cold in the most frustrating way possible. Let's figure out how the hell this happened. Before we talk about the heist, we need to talk about the woman who built this place. Because Isabella Stewart Gardner wasn't just any art collector. She was a scandal in a corset, a Victorian-era socialite who refused to play by Boston's stuffy rules. Born in 1840 to a wealthy New York family, Isabella married Jack Gardner, a Boston Brahmin, and moved into the city's most exclusive circles. But she had zero interest in being a proper society wife. She walked a lion on a leash through the streets. She wore a headband to a Boston Red Sox game and then showed up at Symphony Hall with that same headband just to watch the old money clutch their pearls. When a portrait of her was unveiled showing her in a low-cut dress, the scandal was so intense that her husband supposedly had it removed from public view. But beneath the theatrics was genuine passion. Isabella loved art with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She traveled to Europe constantly, buying paintings, sculptures, tapestries, anything that moved her. Then in 1865, tragedy struck. Her only child, a son named Jackie, died before his 2nd birthday. A few years later, she miscarried. She would never have children again. The grief could have destroyed her. Instead, it redirected her. Isabella decided to build something permanent, a palace. A museum that would be her legacy, filled with the art she loved, arranged exactly as she wanted, and she had one non-negotiable rule. Nothing could ever be moved, sold, or changed after her death. The collection had to remain exactly as she left it, forever. Fenway Court opened to the public in 1903. It was extraordinary. A Venetian palazzo transported to Boston, built around a lush courtyard garden. Tapestries, sculptures, old master paintings, arranged not by period or artist, but by Isabella's personal aesthetic sense. She lived on the 4th floor and curated the collection until she died in 1924, leaving behind a $3.6 million endowment and that ironclad will. Don't touch anything. Don't buy anything new. Don't sell anything. This is how it stays. Which sounds romantic until you realize what it meant decades later. By the 1980s, the museum was broke. The endowment hadn't kept pace with inflation. The building was crumbling. There was no climate control system, no insurance policy on the collection. None. And here's the kicker. In 1982, the FBI uncovered a plot by Boston criminals to rob the Gardner Museum. They warned the museum. The board allocated some funds for security upgrades, 60 infrared motion detectors, 4 closed-circuit cameras around the perimeter, but no cameras inside the galleries because that was too expensive. The only way security guards could summon police was by pressing a panic button at the front desk. Other Boston museums had fail-safe systems where guards had to check in with police every hour. The Gardner didn't. An independent security consultant reviewed the museum in 1988 and basically said, "You need better security." The Museum of Fine Arts down the street offered specific recommendations. The board said no, too expensive, and anyway, Isabella's will forbade major renovations. They also denied a request to raise guard salaries to attract better candidates. Guards were paid barely above minimum wage, and according to people who worked there, the security flaws were an open secret. So when March 17, 1990 rolled around, St. Patrick's Day weekend, the Gardner Museum was essentially a $500 million collection protected by two underpaid guards, motion sensors, and the honor system. Their names were Rick Abath and Randy Hestand. Abath was 23, a regular night watchman who'd been on the job for a while. Hestand was 25, and March 18th was his first time working the overnight shift. The security protocol was simple. One guard patrols the galleries with a flashlight and walkie-talkie, while the other sits at the security desk. Around midnight, Abath took the first patrol. Fire alarms started going off in multiple rooms. He walked through the galleries. No smoke, no fire, nothing. He went back to the security room, where the fire alarm control panel was lighting up like a Christmas tree. He assumed it was a malfunction and shut it down. Then he went back to his rounds. Here's where things get weird. Before finishing his patrol, Abath stopped at the side entrance of the museum. He opened the door briefly, then closed it again. He didn't tell Hestand. The motion sensors recorded it. Abath would later say he did this routinely to check that the door was locked. But one of his colleagues told reporters that if Abath had been opening that door regularly, supervisors would have noticed it on the printouts and stopped him. So was this routine, or was it a signal? At 12:30 a.m., witnesses leaving a St. Patrick's Day party spotted two men in police uniforms sitting in a hatchback on Palace Road, about 100 feet from the museum's side entrance. The witnesses assumed they were real cops. At 1 a.m., Abath returned to the security desk. Hestand took over patrol duties. At 1:24 a.m., the two men walked up to that side entrance and rang the buzzer. It connected them to Abath through an intercom. "We're Boston police," they said. "We're responding to a disturbance. Let us in." Abath looked at the closed-circuit monitor, two guys in police uniforms staring back at him. He wasn't aware of any disturbance, but he figured maybe some drunk St. Patrick's Day reveler had climbed the fence and someone had called it in. So, he broke protocol. He let them in. The men entered a locked foyer, separating the door from the museum interior. They approached Abath at the security desk. "Is anyone else here?" Abath radioed Hestand to come back. As Hestand walked into the room, Abath noticed something. The taller man's mustache looked fake. The shorter thief told Abath he looked familiar, said they might have a warrant for his arrest, told him to step out from behind the desk to show ID. And here's the moment everything went wrong. Abath complied. He left the desk that had the only panic button in the entire museum. The shorter man shoved Abath against the wall and handcuffed him. The taller thief did the same to Hestand. Then they dropped the act. "We're robbing the museum," they said. "Don't give us any problems." They wrapped duct tape around the guards' heads and eyes, led them down to the basement without asking for directions, which suggests they'd been there before, and handcuffed them to pipes. They checked the guards' wallets, noted their addresses, and told them if they kept quiet, they'd get a reward in about a year. 15 minutes. That's all it took to neutralize the only security the Gardner Museum had. It was 1:35 in the morning. Then the thieves disappeared for 13 minutes. Motion detectors didn't pick up any movement. They subdued the guards at 1:35. The sensors didn't record anyone entering the galleries until 1:48. 13 minutes of nothing. Why? Were they waiting to make sure police hadn't been alerted? Were they getting final instructions? We don't know. At 1:48, motion detectors recorded movement in the Dutch room on the second floor. This is where the most valuable paintings hung. Rembrandt, Vermeer, the crown jewels of the collection. As the thieves approached the artwork, a proximity sensor went off, designed to alert when someone got too close. They smashed it. They pulled the Storm on the Sea of Galilee and a lady and gentleman in black off the wall and threw them on the marble floor. The glass shattered. Using a blade, they cut the canvases out of their frames. Not carefully, like someone slicing a pizza. They also removed a massive Rembrandt self-portrait from the wall, but left it leaning against a cabinet. Investigators think it was too heavy, painted on wood instead of canvas, so instead, They took a tiny postage stamp-sized Rembrandt etching that was on display underneath. They also grabbed the Concert by Vermeer and a painting they probably thought was a Rembrandt called Landscape with Obelisk. Plot twist: it had been quietly reattributed to his student Govert Flink a few years before the heist. The thieves didn't get the memo. And finally, they took an ancient Chinese bronze gu, a ceremonial wine cup from the 12th century BC, worth maybe $3,000. Let's pause here. These guys just stole some of the most valuable paintings on Earth. They're in a museum with works by Raphael, Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Titian's Rape of Europa, one of the most valuable paintings in America. They didn't go to the third floor. They didn't touch any of that. Instead, they grabbed a $3,000 bronze cup. Next, they moved to the short gallery at the other end of the second floor. They started unscrewing a frame that held a Napoleonic battle flag. They got partway through and gave up, taking only the eagle finial from the top of the flagpole. It's about 10 inches tall, possibly looked gold to them, and is basically worthless. They also took 5 Degas sketches, small drawings on paper, pencil and charcoal, worth less than $100,000 combined. Finally, they went to the Blue Room on the first floor and took Chez Tortoni by Manet. Here's the thing. The motion detectors in the Blue Room never recorded any movement during the entire heist. Not once. The only footsteps detected in that room all night were Abath's during his earlier patrol. So how did they steal the Manet? Did they somehow disable the sensors? Did someone else take it earlier? Did Abath take it? This question has haunted investigators for 35 years. Before leaving, the thieves went back to check on the guards, asked if they were comfortable. Then they went to the security director's office and took the video cassettes from the closed-circuit cameras. They also grabbed the printouts from the motion detectors. But they left the hard drive that also contained the motion data. At 2:40 a.m., the side doors opened. They carried the first load of art to their car. At 2:45, the doors opened for the last time. 81 minutes after they walked in, they were gone. The next shift of guards arrived later that morning and couldn't get anyone to answer. They called the security director, who opened the building with his keys. Nobody at the desk. They called the police. Officers searched the building and found Abath and Hestan still bound in the basement. The biggest art heist in American history was officially underway. The FBI took over immediately on the assumption the art would cross state lines. And right from the start, they ran into a problem. This case had almost no physical evidence. Fingerprints and footprints at the scene, maybe from the thieves, maybe from museum staff. No way to tell. DNA testing in 1990 was primitive. The videotapes were gone. The only descriptions came from the guards and those St. Patrick's Day witnesses. One thief, 5'9" to 5'10", late 30s, medium build. The other, 6 feet to 6'1", early 30s, heavier build, fake mustache. That's it. That's all they had. So the FBI did what they do when evidence is thin. They started leaning on people. First up, Rick Abath. From day one, investigators found his behavior suspicious. The door opening an hour before the heist. The fact that only his footsteps were detected in the Blue Room, where the Manet was stolen. And there was something else. In 2015, 25 years after the heist, the FBI released security footage from the night before the robbery showing Abath admitting an unidentified man into the museum. They spoke at the security desk for a bit, then the man left. Abath told investigators he had no memory of this and didn't recognize the man. The FBI asked the public for help identifying him. Several former guards came forward. It was the museum's deputy security chief. False alarm. But the suspicion around Abath never fully disappeared. Some investigators developed a theory. Maybe Abath stole the Manet for himself during his patrol, thinking the thieves wouldn't notice one missing painting in the chaos. Then the thieves double-crossed him and took it from wherever he stashed it. It would explain why the motion sensors didn't detect anyone in the Blue Room. It would explain his nervous behavior, but there was never any proof. Abath maintained his innocence for the rest of his life. He died in 2024 at age 57. The FBI agent who ran the investigation in the early years concluded Abath was too incompetent and foolish to have pulled this off. Which, if we're being honest, is maybe the most damning character assessment possible. While the FBI was circling a bath, they were also looking at Boston's criminal underworld. And in 1990, that meant mobsters, lots of them. The most powerful crime boss in Boston at the time was Whitey Bulger, head of the Winter Hill Gang. Bulger denied any involvement, and in fact, he was pissed the robbery happened in his territory without him getting a cut. He sent people out to find who did it so he could collect tribute. FBI agent Thomas McShane investigated Bulger anyway, figuring his connections to the Boston Police Department could explain how the thieves got legitimate police uniforms. Or maybe real cops did the job. Bulger also had ties to the Provisional IRA, and McShane noticed something interesting. Tripping a fire alarm before a heist was a calling card of both the IRA and its rival, the Ulster Volunteer Force. Both organizations had operatives in Boston in 1990. Both had pulled off art heists before. But McShane couldn't find evidence linking Bulger or the IRA to the Gardner theft. One retired Scotland Yard investigator, Charlie Hill, later claimed Bulger gave the paintings to the IRA, and they're probably in Ireland. No proof, just a theory. Then there was Miles Connor Jr., a legendary New England art thief. Connor had robbed museums before and had a history of using stolen art to negotiate reduced prison sentences. Problem was, Connor was in jail the night of the Gardner heist, but Connor told authorities he knew who did it. He said his associate Bobby Donati masterminded the robbery along with a criminal named David Houghton. Connor claimed he and Donati had cased the Gardner Museum together, and Donati had been particularly interested in that Napoleonic eagle finial. According to Connor, Houghton visited him in prison after the heist and told him he and Donati organized it to get Connor released from jail. If true, they borrowed the idea from Connor himself, since he'd used stolen art to reduce sentences before. The problem? Donati and Houghton didn't match the witness descriptions. Connor suggested they hired lower-level guys to do the actual robbery. Here's where things get dark. Bobby Donati was murdered in 1991, about a year after the heist, beaten to death in the trunk of a car during a gang war within the Patriarca crime family. David Houghton died in 1991 too, from an illness. Connor tried to leverage his information for the museum's reward money and his freedom. When investigators didn't bite, he pointed them toward an antiques dealer named William Youngworth. The FBI raided Youngworth's properties in the mid-90s. In 1997, Youngworth contacted Boston Herald reporter Tom Mashberg and told him he could prove he had access to the stolen paintings. One night in August, Youngworth picked up Mashberg and drove him to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Inside, Youngworth pulled a painting from a storage tube, unfurled it under flashlight, and showed it to Mashberg. It looked like the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Mashberg saw cracking on the canvas, edges cut in a way consistent with the museum's reports, Rembrandt's signature on the ship's rudder. He wrote about it in the Herald. The FBI eventually found the warehouse and raided it. Nothing. Youngworth provided paint chips, supposedly from the Rembrandt. Testing showed they were from the right era, but didn't match the oils used in the storm on the Sea of Galilee. He later provided more chips and photographs. Testing suggested they might be from the concert, the Vermeer. But here's the thing. The way Mashberg described the painting being unfurled raised red flags. The storm on the Sea of Galilee was covered in heavy varnish. It wouldn't roll easily. And Youngworth's demands kept escalating. Full immunity. Connor released from jail. The U.S. Attorney's Office got tired of his games and stopped negotiating. Was Youngworth a con man running an elaborate scam, or did he actually have access and blow his chance at a payday by overplaying his hand? We still don't know. While all this was happening, the FBI was quietly building a case around a crew from Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood in Boston. The operation was run out of an auto repair shop owned by a mobster named Carmelo Merlino. The shop was a front for a gang loyal to Boston Mafia boss Frank Salemi. It turns out the Gardner Museum had been on organized crime's radar for years. In 1981, a criminal named Louis Royce cased the museum and developed plans to rob it using smoke bombs and chaos. In 1982, when the FBI was investigating Royce for an unrelated art theft, they learned about his interest in the Gardner and warned the museum. That's what prompted those minimal security upgrades. Royce was in prison during the actual heist, but investigators believed he shared his plan with others, possibly a guy named Stephen Rossetti. Merlino got arrested for cocaine trafficking in 1992. He told authorities he could return the paintings for a reduced sentence. He asked his associate David Turner to track them down. Turner came back empty-handed, but said he heard they were in a church in South Boston. Merlino never had direct access to the paintings, but investigators thought he could broker their return. The FBI became convinced Turner was one of the actual thieves. Evidence showed he went to Florida to pick up a cocaine order days before the heist. Credit card records suggested he stayed there the night of the robbery, but investigators thought he might have been building an alibi. They also believed the other thief was Turner's friend George Reisfelder, another Merlino associate. Reisfelder died in July 1991, just a few months after the heist. No evidence was found in his apartment, but his siblings remembered a painting in his bedroom that looked like Chez Tortoni. Investigators thought he resembled the slimmer man in the police sketches. That makes 4 people connected to this case who died within 18 months of the robbery: Donati, Houghton, Reisfelder, and a 4th associate named James Marks. 4 deaths. The chilling effect on the investigation was real. Nobody wanted to talk. In 1999, the FBI arrested Turner, Merlino, Rossetti, and others the day they planned to rob a Loomis Fargo vault. During questioning, the FBI told Turner they knew he did the Gardner heist. If he returned the paintings, they'd let him go. Turner said he had no idea who stole them or where they were. At his trial, he claimed entrapment, arguing the FBI let the Loomis Fargo plot proceed just to pressure him about Gardner. The jury didn't buy it. He went to prison. Merlino died in prison in 2005. Turner got out in 2019 and has said nothing. The other major figure in this story is Robert Gentile, a Connecticut mobster. According to the widow of Robert Guarente, another gangster, her husband had possessed some of the Gardner paintings. When Guarente got sick with cancer in the early 2000s, he gave them to Gentile for safekeeping. Gentile denied everything. In 2012, the FBI indicted Gentile on drug charges, likely trying to pressure him. They gave him a polygraph. It indicated he was lying when he denied knowledge of the theft. He demanded a retest. During the retest, he said Guarente's widow once showed him a stolen Rembrandt self-portrait. The polygraph said that was true. His lawyer arranged a smaller meeting with fewer federal agents, hoping Gentile would open up. He didn't. Days later, the FBI raided Gentile's house in Manchester, Connecticut. In the backyard shed, they found a secret ditch under a false floor, empty. Jail's son said the ditch had flooded years earlier, and his father was upset about whatever was stored there. In the basement, they found a copy of the Boston Herald from March 1990 reporting the theft and a handwritten list of the stolen works with estimated black market values. But no paintings. Gentile went to prison for 30 months on the drug charges. He never gave up information that could have reduced his sentence or freed him. After his release, he told reporter Stephen Kirkjian he'd been framed. He said the list in his basement was written by another criminal trying to broker the return of the paintings from Guarente and was using Gentile as a middleman. As for the flooded ditch, Gentile thought maybe it had small motors in it. He died in 2021. The paintings didn't surface. In March 2013, the FBI held a press conference. They announced with high confidence that they'd identified the thieves, members of a criminal organization based in New England and the Mid-Atlantic. They believed the artwork had been transported to Connecticut and Philadelphia in the years after the theft, with an attempted sale in Philadelphia in 2002. After that, the trail went cold. The FBI stated both thieves were deceased. Though they didn't name names publicly, sources familiar with the investigation said they meant George Reisfelder and Leonard DiMuzio, another Dorchester crew member who died in 1991. In 2014, journalist Stephen Kirkjian reached out to Vincent Ferrara, a high-ranking member of the Patriarca crime family. Ferrara had been Bobby Donati's superior during the gang war. An associate of Ferrara called Kirkjian back and told him the FBI was wrong about the Merlino gang. Donati organized it, he said. About 3 months before the heist, Donati visited Ferrara in jail after Ferrara was charged with murder. Donati told Ferrara he was going to do something to get him out. 3 months later, the Gardner heist happened. Donati visited Ferrara again and confirmed he was involved. He said he'd buried the artwork and would start negotiating for Ferrara's release once things cooled down. Then Donati was murdered. The negotiations never happened. Kirkjian believes Donati was motivated to free Ferrara because Ferrara could protect him in the gang war. A friend of Guarente later corroborated that Donati organized the robbery and gave paintings to Guarente when he feared for his safety. The two were close friends. Witnesses placed them at a social club in Revere shortly before the robbery with a bag of police uniforms. So if we believe this version, Donati masterminded it. Reisfelder and DiMuzio were the thieves. Donati was murdered. Guarente held the paintings, then gave them to Gentile, who either still has them, sold them, or watched them get destroyed in a flooded ditch. Or maybe the FBI's theory about Turner is right. Or maybe Abath was involved. Or maybe the IRA has them in Ireland. Or maybe William Youngworth was telling the truth. 35 years later, we have a dozen compelling theories and 0 paintings. There was a moment in 1994 when it seemed like this might get solved. Museum director Ann Hawley received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to be a third-party negotiator. They said the art was stolen to reduce someone's prison sentence, but that opportunity had passed, so there was no longer a motive to keep it. The writer claimed the artwork was in a non-common law country under climate-controlled conditions. They wanted immunity for everyone involved and $2.6 million wired to an offshore account. To prove legitimacy, they shared information only the museum and FBI knew at the time. If the museum was interested, they should print a coded message in the Boston Globe. Hawley felt this was real. The FBI agreed. The coded message ran in the May 1, 1994 edition. A few days later, a second letter arrived. The writer acknowledged the museum's interest, but said they'd become fearful of the massive federal and state investigation to determine their identity. They needed time to evaluate options. The museum never heard from them again. Jeffrey Kelly ran the FBI's Gardner investigation for 22 years before retiring in 2024. He spent more time on this case than anyone. In recent interviews, he said he believes the paintings still exist. He thinks they've been separated, scattered. He mentioned there were sightings a couple of years ago, but nothing panned out. When asked where he thinks they are, he said someone will probably find them in an attic someday. The museum's director of security, Anthony Amore, continues the investigation. The reward stands at $10 million, the largest ever offered by a private institution. It's for information leading directly to the recovery of all 13 works in good condition. Federal prosecutors have stated anyone who returns the art won't be prosecuted. The statute of limitations expired in 1995, so even the original thieves couldn't be charged if they were still alive. The empty frames still hang in the Dutch room. They've been there since 1994. Not as a memorial, but as a statement of intent. We're waiting. We believe you're coming home. This heist changed museum security across America. After Gardner, institutions upgraded their systems, increased guard training, installed better cameras, implemented redundancies. It exposed how vulnerable these places were. One underpaid guard making one bad decision at 1:24 in the morning, and $500 million in art disappears. But here's what really haunts people about this case. The FBI knows who did it. They're confident in their theory. Both thieves are dead. Several people who likely handled the paintings afterward are dead. And yet, the art is still gone. 13 masterpieces, including the most valuable stolen painting in the world, are somewhere. In an attic, a basement, a storage unit, another country. Degrading without climate control, cracking, fading. Or maybe they were destroyed decades ago and were chasing ghosts. The Gardner Museum has thrived in the years since the theft. It built a modern wing, expanded its programs, draws more visitors than ever. But walk into the Dutch room and you'll feel the absence. Those empty frames are a wound that won't close. Isabella Stewart Gardner built that museum to last forever, exactly as she arranged it. The thieves violated that in the worst way possible. They didn't just steal paintings, they stole a vision. Somewhere out there, Maybe in a Connecticut basement, maybe in an Irish farmhouse, maybe in a Philadelphia collector's private vault. The concert by Johannes Vermeer is waiting. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee is waiting. 13 works of irreplaceable art are waiting to be found, and every day that passes, the chances get slimmer. The people who know are dying. Memories fade, evidence degrades, but the museum keeps those frames on the wall. Keep the placeholders ready, because they're coming back. They have to be, right?